Howdy, howdy. It is another exciting Friday night, and we are here with another exciting live Tex-Trek podcast talking about this week's episode of Star Trek. We have a new Strange New Worlds. So Dave is here with me to talk about this new episode. And we're also going to have some big announcements. For those of y'all watching live, I'm about to update the internet with some of the big news for the Tex-Trek platform going forward. So, Dave, are you ready to get this show started?
Let's hit it.
I'm Fatheree.
This is Dave.
And this is Tex-Trek.
Engage.
Welcome back aboard the Starship Texas for the 191st installment of the Tex-Trek podcast, the home of Star Trek fandom from deep in the heart of Texas, where we take a deep look at Star Trek old and new. And tonight we are talking about Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 1, Episode 3, Ghosts of Illyria, written by Akela Cooper and Bill Wolkoff, and directed by Leslie Hope. And just real quick on those creators, the writers, Akela Cooper and Bill Wolkoff. This is their first Star Trek credits, but Akela Cooper is in this week's Ready Room with Will Wheaton, and so I thought that was delightful seeing her and hearing her thoughts on the process of writing this episode and creating this story. And Bill Wolkoff, I actually know that name. He was a writer in the other Star franchise on their animated show Star Wars Rebels, which I think is one of the best things that they've done since the original trilogy, which isn't a high praise if you know how critical I am of some of the garbage that franchise can put out sometimes. But Leslie Hope, though, the director, this is a cool one, Dave. You haven't met her yet, but in Deep Space Nine Season 6, she actually plays Kira's mom through some time travel flashback type shenanigans.
I happened to read that somewhere when I was browsing around. So
probably for me, I was the first person to point that out. So days ago, I was trying to blast that all over the internet.
No, it was someplace else.
Well, they heard it from me because I was the first one to unearth that.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. And also, I wish I had watched the Ready Room. I've been doing that with the new show, and I just somehow forgot. I need to see it. Stop the podcast.
Well, it's out there, so you can see it on Paramount Plus. You can see it on YouTube. Real quick, though, before we talk about this episode, there's a little bit of news, though. We have some big announcements. I just wanted to let everyone know that we have finally launched the Tex-Trek Discord server. So if people want to connect with us on Discord, that option is available. There's actually should be a link in the description here. And there's a link that's going to tweet out in a moment, and I'll just go ahead and put it in the chat for the live audience. But anyone who uses Discord, please come on board our Discord server. We're just getting it started, so we are still kind of trying to figure out our way around that, but we're going to try to do a lot of cool, fun stuff on there. And in addition to Discord, we are also launching the Tex-Trek Patreon, which is going to have some cool perks for people who want to chip in and help support the show. So, we would appreciate anything people can help us out with. You can join in for as low as $2 a month, and then there's some higher tiers on there. But there's going to be exclusive stuff in the Discord server. There's also, if you might not use Discord, but we're going to be doing things like episode watch-alongs for some tiers and a lot of online interactivity. So there's cool things there. If you want to check that out, that link is also going to be available in the same places, and I'll go ahead and put that in the chat now. But yeah, we already have one patron, our friend Starfleet Boy, who helps us out quite often. He was proud to be first, but yeah, if you want to follow his example,
He's the man.
and every dime is going back into the show. This is just something that is just something I've been funding for the last few years, and it just kind of adds up a little bit, the expenses of web hosting, of podcast hosting, and equipment and computers and all of that stuff. So if people are able and generous enough to chip in, you can $2 a month. That's what we typically do, 4 podcasts a month, so that's like 50 cents a show. So but it would add up and go a long way. And if you want to come in on one of the higher levels, we have that option as well. So thank you though. Please go check out the Patreon site though, and see if there's anything there that you're interested in. And in the meantime though, we will talk about Ghosts of Illyria. One other big announcement I forgot. If you're checking this out live, otherwise it doesn't matter, it'll already happen probably, but if you're checking us out live on Friday night, then you need to come to the Trek Central stream at 3 p.m. Central Sunday. Our friend Starfleet Boy, speaking of him, he's going to be over there, and I'm going to appear, and there might be some more announcements, some more big news over there on the Trek Central channel on their live stream Sunday at 3 p.m. Central. So,
smashing.
Tune into that. Now, Dave, are you ready to talk about some ghosts and some Illyria?
I'm a horror nerd, and so I am always ready for ghosts. Yes, let's do it.
Nice. Well, I'm just going to quickly recap this episode by reading the official synopsis, and then I'll kind of expand on that with spoilers. But the official synopsis reads: the USS Enterprise encounters a contagion that ravages the ship. One by one, the entire crew is incapacitated, except for number 1, Una Chin Riley, who must now confront a secret she's been hiding as she races to find a cure. Yeah, and that secret turns out to be that she is secretly an Illyrian, a genetically enhanced being who her body is able to solve the problem and get them the cure, but it also exposes her. And it's an episode largely about prejudice and something kind of relevant to our modern day life. Dave, do you want to give the first opening statement, kind of express your broad thoughts on this episode?
Sure. I want to first mention a notion that I had while I was watching it, which was a dumb notion, I knew, but I kept on thinking about Operation Annihilate and its light-sensitive parasites from that episode. And just wondering, is there some weird tie-in to that? I guess I can't stop thinking about...
It was like the opposite thing. Like, it took over people and made them light adverse, and this takes you over, makes you addicted to light.
Right, I was like, it doesn't seem right, but I was like, and like, it wouldn't make sense that Sam Kirk would have some premonition episode before then, but I was just like, he is on the Enterprise, maybe it means something. So, anyway, it didn't mean anything. So, the episode is a pretty classic Trek format. Everybody has seen some stripe of the contagion unleashed on the Enterprise or on a planet that they're on. That said, there's nothing wrong with using that as a format. Had a lot of elements I liked in this episode. The big storms, that was just in and of itself, I thought, very cool and a fantastic visual. The ion ghost things. I like the thematics in it about sort of keeping people both figuratively and in some cases literally in the dark, and how that worked out. And I thought there was some. It was cool to see how in a tight, concise episode you could still have real character growth coming out of the events and the reveals in it. For me, somehow though, I've been turning it over a bit in my head. I'm still a little undecided on it, but it didn't hit quite as hard as the first 2 episodes. I think that M'Benga's reveal, while dramatic, was actually stepped up into almost too melodramatic. It was like too dramatic. It seemed a little hokey to me, maybe. I think the 2 sort of plots that were running, as far as there was the planet side and the Enterprise plot, that I wanted a little bit more out of each of them. I think I wanted the surface team to it maybe interact more with the Illyrian ghosts, and I just wanted like, or maybe a little bit more rounded out interaction there. And on the Enterprise, I think I wanted to see the infection, the conversations that came out of it, especially near the end, to maybe go a little bit deeper. That said, I think that we got a dramatic we got the ensemble cast here going, and I'm liking that in every episode with a focus. It was great to see Una get the focus, big reveal about her, and it's the reveals are clearly going to have repercussions and continue on down. So that was a cool thing to do, and you can't resolve all the morally complex issues in just one episode. But overall, my vibe is that I liked this episode. I didn't love the episode. What about you, Fatheree?
Oh, for me, this was another big win for me. I am always excited by learning these characters, learning more about them. I think that's a really cool thing for a new Star Trek show to do. Something that we've always talked about, like what might we see in this new Star Trek show? In the early days of Discovery and everything else. When we were talking about like these shows coming out, and one of the things was talking about those character centric episodes that kind of like show something of someone's backstory, and that's really good material to explore in season 1 when you are introducing these people, and you can kind of take your time and tell a variety of different stories and get to know these people along the way. But yeah, not only do we get a lot of number 1 in this episode, but there's also more Hemmer. Because he was barely in the first episode. We got like a little bit more in the second episode, and then more here, more Mbenga. Although I've heard some people complain about the Mbenga stuff, so you're not alone on that, Dave. And more Leon as well. It's talking about like the horror element. That is definitely there. That's something that was very much present in the original series and kind of came out of science fiction's earlier days when it was definitely slanted more horror in general, especially in movies and film and stuff. So we got that, but they do the classic Trek thing of the monster's not really a monster. It's like the Horta and Devil in the Dark, or the Gorn, and things are more nuanced and complicated. And also the tradition of telling those relevant stories, those morality stories. This is very much like I think I mentioned when I was recapping it, but it's a story about prejudice and about not judging a book by its cover, and we kind of use the word prejudice interchangeably with like bigotry and racism and stuff like that now. But the actual definition of the word is like prejudging. When you prejudge or something, when you have these preconceived notions and you judge someone based on that. And so yeah, that's what this episode was all about. And it is kind of in that Star Trek style of being a kind of blunt and obvious, but also hopefully fun and enjoyable. And it's an episode about like the super infectious disease, and I wonder what writers were thinking about when they came up with that idea. But I think they did that pretty tastefully too. It didn't. We might be at a point now, enough light at the end of the tunnel that we're able to enjoy these stories and maybe kind of relate to the characters going through them a little bit more. And it's something that Star Trek's done a lot. There's tons of like medical issue episodes. The ones that people keep comparing this to are the Naked Time and the Naked Now, but there's a lot of other. You have the Deadly Years, and the animated series did several. Yeah, they've all done this, so it was good to see a modern reinterpretation of that type of Star Trek story. And ultimately, though, this episode is about Una Chen Riley and giving us her backstory, and all a lot of fun for me. I watched it the first time, and I was like, well, that's not quite as good as the first two, and I wasn't really sure why. But then, like on rewatching it a couple times, I'm like, I think I actually might like this one the most. And I even like I understand like some of the criticisms you're having, like some of the reveals, but for me with like a lot of that stuff, it's there would be something that like I'm not really sure how I feel about that, but then I would keep watching. There'd be like a line of dialogue eventually where you're like, that actually goes a long way to making me feel better about that or better about this. And a lot of the arc things that they're setting up, kind of like the Pike thing. Like I was talking about the last couple of weeks. I don't want every episode to be Pike talking about like I'm so scared of my future. What am I going to do? We didn't talk about it this week, and so I like that. It's like, so maybe they're not going to just beat me up with that every week. So, a lot of the stuff I do kind of try to wait and see how it plays out, and where they're going with it. They're obviously building up to more stories with Una and her revelations, and they're building up to more stories with Mbenga and his secret. So I'm not really going to have much opinions on that stuff until I see the final results of that. But yeah, so another big W for me this week.
You know, the interesting thing for me is, I forget who it was who said it last week, was that if you hit an episode you don't like, with this format, all you have to do is wait a week and boom, you're on. And I didn't even dislike the episode. It was just one that it didn't seem to strike me as much as some of the others.
Yeah, to be fair, you were pretty taken with the last two.
It's true. And I will say this: on my second viewing, I did find myself there were some things that were I had there's something of the same experience you did, where I was like, oh, you know what? I actually missed a line or two here and there that sort of made something a little bit more nuanced or set it up in a more subtle way than I expected. And so that did sort of alleviate some of that. But anyway, yeah, why don't we dive in on some details?
Sure, so let's go into our episode breakdown. We're just going to start off at the opening, talking about that very beginning. We see the landing party mission on Hedemet 9, which is getting hit by the ion storm. And, right off the bat, one of the reasons why this episode does work better on rewatch, I think, is you understand what's going on with Una. She's a little nervous at the beginning of the episode. We're not sure why, but we see Ensign Lance expose himself to the virus that travels on light. Again, things you don't know the first time you see it, but after having the context of the entire episode makes more sense. And that gets us the infection on the Enterprise, and then Pike and Spock stranded due to the storm.
When Lance gets the infection, I mean, I'm sure we all noticed it, especially if you did a second viewing, but there's kind of little shimmering dust motes in the air. There's that suggest, the same way that on the classic Trek in, Naked Time, you heard that little sound.
Oh yeah, when the dude touched the whatever, he took his glove off, and I always thought it was real silly. Actually, not to go on a tangent too much, but I met that actor at a convention in Plano, Texas, in I think 1999. And no, it was 2001. It was right before Enterprise premiered. Mm-hmm. And I asked him, I was just this dumb teenager in 2001, but I asked him, why would your character take off his glove and do that? He's like, I thought I was wondering the same thing, but it was in the script, so I had to do it. But yes, it is a little reminiscent of that.
Yeah, I've seen this. I saw some people say this guy looked like Timothy Chalamet, and a little bit of Tom Hiddleston in there too. And I believe both of those have elements of truth. Really, nothing more to say than he just happens to resemble them slightly, but it's true.
My favorite part of that opening, though, was Hemmer having to do the cool engineer badassery.
Yeah, he. The sort of shock and surprise that who's the transporter chief? It's
Kyle.
That he has. He's like, what? He's like, what just happened?
That's mainly what the Kyle actor does. He stands at the same console and he just has these really surprised looks on his face.
Hey, he's good at that. He's pulled their fat out of the fire on his own a few times. So
yes, he
so
has.
Respect to him. But yes,
he comes through in the clutch
because. What is it? Hemmer? Is that?
Yeah.
Because he is, I'm going to say particularly prickly in this episode. It's good to show him coming through in the clutch a few times, too, so that his arrogance is matched by ability.
Yeah, Starfleet Boy in our live audience is saying Hemmer is bae. But yes, he's a lot of fun. He's he kind of has that Odo grumpiness, but he's still going to remind you how good he is at his job, but different enough from that it's not that.
Right, Odo wasn't necessarily arrogant. He honestly, it was kind of a more traditional cop-like gruffness. Hemmer's arrogant. I see Joel in the audience mentions Hemmer's finger snap. I guess that was when he dispatched his crew when they had the lockdown, and he's just like, get out. Great little visual moment.
But this gives us Spock and Pike on their separate B story, which, as you point out, yeah, we don't get a ton of that. So I can understand, being disappointed with not enough substance on that. We'll get more into that stuff later. Let's talk about the light addiction on the bridge and on the ship rather, and starting with Lance, but quickly spreading.
Fatheree, hang on. You showed a slide image of their cool away team jackets. We have to quick talk about that. Una really is she's flaunting it when she comes back onto the bridge, and she's still wearing it. This is you figure this is a conceptual update of this stuff from the cage?
Yeah, I was actually going to talk about this in our Gorn segment because it does have canonical history within the Star Trek universe.
I jumped ahead, but only to say that the aesthetics are dope.
It's stylish. I like it.
It looked
I would
good
wear
on everybody, and yeah, it's clearly if they market that in some way, I believe fans will be interested.
But Lance didn't want that jacket and all that gear on. He's trying to like strip down and rub his body up against lights and stuff like a weirdo. Yeah. I like Ortega's as kind of like non-judgment about that, where she's like, oh, okay, whatever tweaks your freak.
Yeah, this is that's what I like to hear on Enterprise and any Starfleet ship. Non-judgmental, vaguely sex positive or kink positive or whatever she thinks he might be doing.
Until it turns violent.
Yeah. Yeah, he suddenly this is another horror type element in addition to the ghosty stuff. Is that his creepy head smash. Then she's all on the ball.
I'm surprised that this guy didn't die. I thought he was going to be like the first red shirt of the show. But no one dies in this episode, which is very important. Otherwise, M'Benga would literally, well, not literally, but he would very much figuratively have blood on his hands.
Right.
But yeah, so far, Pike has not lost anybody. So,
N Squared in the comments asks if anybody else thought the window was showing the sun and was confused that the air didn't blow out when he did it. Now, I suspected that you couldn't just like headbutt a given window on the Enterprise, but I actually wasn't. I didn't know what it was, and so
I thought it was
did
just like a hallway lamp. So it was just what I expected. By the way, N Squared, people should go check out their YouTube channel because they do a lot of episode reviews and Eagle Moss ship reviews. So
right
They have some cool content to check out. If that tweaks your freak.
I'm going to start using that. It's going to replace Yum Yum.
You know what tweaked my freak in this episode? I promise everyone I'll stop saying that. But what I was kind of excited by was I had a huge crush on Rebecca Romijn. I'm sure everyone did in 2000 when the first X-Men movie came out. Speaking of when I was a dumb teenager back in the day, but yeah, like I gotta say, like I'm still kind of smitten for her because when she was like staring at that lamp, like she was pretty excited for the lamp and started like ripping her clothes off. I was like, oh, Rebecca Romijn, yeah, I still like you quite a bit.
That's right, yeah.
But it was confusing the first time. You have no idea what's going on.
Well, there's several different kind of red herrings, including M'Benga's. His kind of duplicity about the medical transporter early on, and you're like, oh wait, is this related? This must be you assume it has to be related to the virus, and it seems like she's just experiencing the virus in a different way here. But yeah, it's that suddenly gave off Naked Time, Naked Now vibes there.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why I didn't like the episode as much the first time is because I was confused for so long, which isn't necessarily a criticism. I think it's good for stories to confuse the audience for a little bit as long as it makes sense by the end. Sometimes it's good to be confused. But like when she starts glowing red, you're obviously going to assume that's part of this. It's connected to why Lance is smashing his head. It's only later that you learn like, oh no, that was her Illyrian body curing herself of that virus. Like she's done with it. She's done with her light addiction. But you don't know why she's acting weird the rest of the episode. And why she's like when M'Benga takes like the blood sample from her and she seems kind of nervous and all that stuff. It's all about her Illyrian baggage and not the actual virus.
The two people keeping secrets here inadvertently look guilty in our eyes, or not guilty, but at least like they are.
They look sus.
Yeah, they look a little sus.
Yeah, and that does kind of tie into the bigger story though about prejudice, but it also has to deal with acceptance and having to hide and keep secrets to hide your true self.
Yeah, totally.
And that has to do with like light and shadows and all of that. So it is very much like all on theme.
Yeah, and it's one of those ones that's done in honestly, I think a pretty decently subtle way overall. That's it's not doesn't hit you over the head with it too hard, or at least it hits me over the head with it in a way that I think is very appropriate.
I said that it felt like Picard season 2 and Discovery season 4 might have benefited from having a long time to work on those scripts due to COVID. Although like some of the writing in Picard season 2 kind of let me down, so I don't know if that's true. But so far, I do kind of feel like all of the scripts in Strange New Worlds, they all feel like they are kind of well polished and maybe not perfect, but
there's a certain standard that they're hitting
Yeah.
that is that I think is like above the average, and it's pretty impressive.
which is important if you're doing like these self-contained stories, because you don't have time to come back and fix it later. You kind of need it to work within the episode that it's within.
And I feel also like by not having sort of like slightly filler moments where they have to reiterate some plot point for the big, for a meta plot. Very often you get more the individual scenes feel cooler to me. Like I might want to be like, oh, I just want to go back and watch this scene where Pike is talking to Spock, or just this scene where M'Benga is talking to Una,
this scene where Una is ripping her uniform off.
It's just, with the age of digital technology, it's just very impressive.
Well, let's talk about like the investigation of M'Benga trying to figure out the disease and Hemmer trying to figure out how did it get on board the ship. The biofilter should have caught it. I like that piece of dialogue from Hemmer saying that the biofilters don't miss anything. If they don't know what something is, they don't beam it up.
Yeah. So many exceptions do seem to get through on Trek that I don't know if his certainty is justified. It is still very him.
Yeah, he's certain of his transporters.
Right, that's true.
Oh, and when they do briefly get communication with Pike before they lose signal again, when you see Uhura sitting at the communication station, it made me think like, oh, they're kind of, when I was rewatching this anyways, it made me think, oh, they're kind of using Uhura like the way the original series did, where she's, kind of in the background, just like hailing frequencies open, whatever or not. But that's okay because they just gave us a bunch of Uhura time last week. And they give her something else to do later when we see her with her roommates. But yeah, she's not very important in this episode. It's just using the ensemble cast well. Uhura got a lot of spotlight last week. This week, she takes a back seat, but we get more of Leon and Hemmer and Una. So, and M'Benga.
I wanted to just remember that you're talking about the ensemble stuff and just this sort of bridge vibe too. That reminded me like when Una gets back on the bridge right after beaming up for the first time, and she like throws out a bunch of orders about having, monitoring the away team and, having everything prepped for as soon as the ion storm passed. And, it did that thing that I really like on Strange New Worlds, and they would do it on Discovery too, but I feel like they're just more refined about it here, of like making me feel like these people are on the ball, that they're looking out for their crew members. They're trying to be ahead of the game on everything. It conveys a cool bit of confidence without being, I don't know, arrogant or anything like that. They just seem like they're on the fucking ball.
And it's very organic. So it's not like, just for example, I don't know, like People of Earth, Discovery Season 3, I think Episode 3, when Michael is like, oh, we're in like this hostile standoff with this ship. I'm just going to go hijack a shuttle and not even tell Captain Saru what I'm doing for like no reason, just to create like this next dramatic scene with tension and have tension with me and Saru. And it's just, it didn't feel like a organic, functional crew,
Yeah. When I was watching this, I was a little initially frustrated that Una has this very clear experience with it and then doesn't tell Dr. M'Benga about it, right? We know why later. She's trying to hide her genetic heritage. But initially I was like, oh man, I hate it when people kind of do the secret keeping just to advance the plot. Somebody as skilled as her shouldn't be hiding something that could affect the health of the crew.
I think that bothers a lot of people. I've heard some other people mention that type of stuff. That doesn't really stand out as a problem to me, but it makes sense when you explain it.
Well, like in this episode very specifically, there was a reason behind it. And I can have a character that I admire, like number one, who still might make a bad judgment call in a moment, because
she does come clean when the stakes look pretty damn high. She comes clean without much hesitation.
Right, and I think here's the thing: in her head, coming clean almost certainly means leaving Starfleet.
Yeah, her life is over. Her career, everything's gone.
End of it, yeah. And you might be like, but like lives could have been at stake before that, maybe. But, I do not demand perfect characters. I like some characters who exhibit reasonable, selfish self-interest that people do sometimes. And she is still very much a hero.
Let's talk about that conversation between her and Leon when Leon's talking about genetically engineered people. We get confirmation like she is a descendant of Khan Noonien Singh, which some people seem to be really, really upset about. I think some people think that it breaks canon, but it doesn't. People know about Khan.
Right. It's more just like
it's small world.
The vibe it gave off in the original series in Space Seed was kind of like, oh, that was so far in the past. I guess everybody needs to probably find out about who Khan is, if you're not a history buff. And like here, it seems like, oh, everybody knows who Khan is.
Well, everyone knew who Khan is in the original series, right? They didn't know that dude was Khan Noonien Singh because he didn't tell them his last name. He's like, nope, my name's Khan. What's your last name? Nope, just Khan. And then they're like Googling, like, do you think he's like that Khan Noonien Singh dude from the 1990s? Like, they actually figure it out pretty quickly. Like,
yeah.
Here's a picture of him. Yeah, he kind of looks like that. So I think this is that Khan. So it's not like Khan was like a secret. I think some people might be misremembering Space Seed. But it definitely it is small universe,
part of it is just that like Spock, as if they could somehow anticipate this show being made. It's like Spock never said, "Oh, yes, I actually served with one of Khan's descendants" or anything like that. Like
he might have said that off camera.
Right. Yeah, actually, that could very well be. But yeah, it's just sort of feels a little bit, if nothing else, the small world thing that we've talked about that can be a criticism. It's a big criticism in the other Star franchise. It's sometimes a criticism in Star Trek.
And that is one of the things that I do kind of worry about Strange New Worlds running into. I think there's like a big temptation to like, oh look, like everyone knew Sam Kirk. Oh look, everyone knows like Khan's descendant Leon. So it's like, yeah, is Spock gonna meet like the relatives of Sulu and Chekhov and Scotty and everyone before he actually meets them? Is it does kind of run that risk, I'm afraid. So I am a little worried about that going forward, but overall not like a big deal, and it certainly doesn't break anything in canon.
Right. Yeah, no doubt.
But yeah, this establishes, she kind of has like that, after growing up with that prejudice against her, it kind of makes her have her own biases against augments, against the genetically engineered or enhanced.
Well, she's been like getting trash talked for it like all her life. And, that, like, angst kind of has to go somewhere. So,
did you notice that in the first episode, when they go and they rescue Una from when she was being held in captivity, Leon calls her Chief, and then here she calls her Chief.
I saw somebody mention it somewhere. What she knew what's the Chief reference?
We don't know, but
like
Una,
her position when she saved Leon, presumably?
Yeah, Una might have been like chief of security or, I don't know, transporter chief or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Or some people just say, like, the little town I grew up in, Rockdale, Texas, there were like only 2 doctors in that town, so like we all had like the same doctors. But yeah, Dr. Weed, he called everyone chief. If you were born between like 1960 and 1995, you probably like and you lived in Rockdale, Texas, you had Dr. Weed as your doctor, and if you were a boy, he called you Chief.
I'm a retail manager at a comic and game shop, and I once in a blue moon, but often enough that it still happens, have a customer call me chief. It's kind of like a slightly more friendly, respectful thing. I guess it's rooted in sort of nebulous, uncool Native American appropriation stuff. But usually it's meant as like a slight show of respect, like, "Hey, you got it, chief." So it's a sort of it's a friendly thing.
Yeah, it is. I prefer to call people Hoss, but that's just me. That's like when I want to like show some respect to someone, I'll be like, "All right, you got it, Hoss."
Yeah.
But
that's so Texan.
Well,
I guess
that's part of our brand.
Starship. We are on the Starship Texas, so I suppose in a weird way it fits.
But I guess the big turn here when Leon comes down with the light addiction and is trying to make out with the lamp in the ready room on Pike's desk, that this reveals, oh no, it's not just the landing party. The virus has spread to the rest of the ship.
Right.
That's when we get the level 5 lockdown, and they start using all the COVID terminology like contact tracing.
Yeah. You know what's funny is I actually, when at least the initial viewing, I don't think I particularly thought about that. That just seemed like a normal sort of medical procedure, just the kind of terminology that, they might have used on the original show, even had they had a little bit more experience with pandemics. But a pretty common medical term that you would throw out there just to kind of show that a little bit of realism, make a little jargon to make it feel real. So yeah, like by no means did I think, like, oh, it's a COVID episode, I guess, or something like that. Were you bothered at all by the jargon or the COVID stuff, Fatheree?
No, it's like I said, I think they just like dabbled enough with that to it just felt a little bit more relatable than I think it would normally be. And honestly, Dave, I've had this experience with a lot of the other Star Trek episodes that we've rewatched, and just since COVID began over 2 years ago, we have put out Tex-Trek content covering all of the animated series. We did that with our friends Aaron Harvey and Rich Shepis, the writers of the animated series book.
Super fun, yeah.
And there were a couple like medical virus episode stories in there. We've done most of Deep Space Nine. We're going to be doing some more Deep Space Nine later this year. Yeah, we've covered the first 4 seasons of that show, and yeah, there was some instances there, and remember the blight that Dr. Bashir is trying to cure on that planet. And when he tells her the main thing now will just be making sure everyone gets the vaccine. But yeah,
it were that easy.
A lot of these stories do feel more relatable now. So, but this felt the same as that type of stuff.
Right. In a lot of ways, we were essentially every time I would hear stories about pandemics and things in like the last, I'm going to say 20 years of stories about viruses, whether they were fictional or not, they always kind of said, major pandemic, it's not a matter of if, it's just when. And so, yeah, we didn't quite have, like, they were, of course, always happening, and especially in smaller countries with less developed infrastructure for dealing with that. And so, they've been, bad viral outbreaks have been happening forever. And we were somewhat insulated in a relatively prosperous country. So now, now that we've experienced it, the things that those shows were about, which would probably tend to be places, that weren't America in the past, now does include America. I think that's the sort of the big difference is any given viral story just has a sudden immediacy because it's just a matter of time happened.
Well, let's talk more about the spread of the virus. When Uhura wakes up and has like the 2 roommates that are like sunburning themselves on like the holographic sun or whatever that was.
Right.
I thought that was kind of weird, but they had
one of those guys. The second guy who talked, he seemed like he was overacting slightly, but I don't know what it's like to have light lust. I did think that Uhura's little kind of cubbyhole like sleeping thing, I kind of liked it though.
Yeah,
it's cool.
Would you rather sleep here or sleep in a hallway on the Cerritos?
I'm gonna say there.
Yeah, here you get like that little flap, so a bit more privacy.
Yeah, I feel like I'm like in a, I don't know, a naval carrier or a submarine or something like that with the on the Cerritos.
But they have to open up the what do they call it? Auxiliary? I can't say that word.
Auxiliary.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a
the
hard word to say.
auxiliary hall. Where in the trailers for the show, we were wondering like, why is there this giant sick bay? Do they go to like a star base or something? Like this doesn't look like that same Enterprise sick bay set we see in all
But
the
it's
other
like an
trailers.
emergency overspill
Yeah,
sick bay.
so that's what it is, which I guess does kind of make sense on a ship
I
this
thought it looked
size.
cool as hell though. Kind of give you a little bit of a visual sense of the scope of things. It's like, oh man, they gotta. For all I know, that's like usually used for some other stuff, but they can quick clear it for medical emergencies or something. But in any case, it felt like oh, this is a big problem.
It seemed functional too. Like their whole sick base set, it just all looks like, oh, this actually looks like a place where they would like be treating sick people in real life.
Well, and it also vibes aesthetically close to TOS. It looks kind of like their look a little Spartan. Just a few splashes of color.
Minimalist.
Yeah.
Basic colors, a lot of gray and white, and then like some very noticeable red bio beds and red doorways. Now this is where there's some sparks between Hemmer and Mbenga also, when Hemmer's trying to continue his diagnostics and Mbenga's like, get away from the transporter. We don't know why he's so upset. It kind of seems like, oh, he didn't want the lights turned off in sickbay and disturbing all of the light addicts in there. These people remind me of those moth memes. Like, you got any of them lamps? If anyone remembers the moth meme, but no, we later learn Mbenga was so hot-headed because he was using the transporter to keep his daughter in there.
Right, Hemmer was just going to go in and clear the cache and kill his daughter.
Yeah, basically. So yeah, but there was I just like Hemmer's just like kind of like frustration with Mbenga. Like, I'm just trying to do my job, bro. Why are you being such a dick? I guess I'll just leave.
Yeah.
And number one is the one who figures out the light thing. They didn't know why people were addicted to light. She's the one who figures out like, oh, Uhura was in total darkness. That's why she didn't get hit by the virus.
Yeah, she did a little classic footwork, a little detective work like that. I like that.
Yeah, Dave, I know you're not like the biggest fan of Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country, but a mostly beloved Star Trek movie, and that has the very famous Detective Spock investigations on the Enterprise. Kind of reminded me of that a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I sometimes like the kind of, the way that on a TV show like this, the way detective work can work, which is where it's kind of cool, where I'm like, oh yeah, that's just a simple, nice, clear explanation, somewhat pop. I don't know. It's satisfying. It's if it's done right, it's satisfying.
It's a different satisfaction when you get this all contained in one episode than when you do the longer, drawn out mystery box type stuff, where you set up a mystery early on, and then there's all like these theory crafting videos on the internet, and then half of that stuff may not even turn out to have anything to do with what they're actually doing in the episode, and then whatever they end up doing might disappoint you. And it's a very different type of storytelling here when you get it all in like one burst.
I have to admit, I love a red herring that is resolved within the episode.
Well, I think that's something that I've learned from I in addition to watching Star Trek, I read a lot of comics, and I've kind of like tried to experiment with writing a 22 or 20 page sequential art script. And one of the things that I've discovered in there is that if you are trying to do a type of misdirect, I think there's a certain art to doing it just within one issue. You set up something at the beginning of the issue and then have the reveal at the end, instead of ending on like a mystery that someone is gonna maybe figure out, maybe not figure out, or maybe forget about, not even care by the time they get like the next issue. And you can apply the same logic to like episodes of a TV show.
It'll be interesting after the fact, because like as a weekly format, I love this. This is my chosen format for Trek. People who binge it once it's done, I'll be curious to see what their experience is. Are they going to be like, oh, it's does it feel too dense? Does it not feel as good as a binge? That'll be something interesting to look back on.
Yeah, that is interesting. Whereas something like Star Trek Picard that felt very drawn out for too long, does that work better as a binge? If you just sit down and watch it all in a weekend.
That's we'll do an after action report on that.
So here they turn off all the lights on the ship, and which I guess is going to slow down the spread of the virus. One thing I wasn't quite sure on though is when they do that, when Mbenga issues the lockdown at the very beginning, and they're like, okay, everyone who's at your station, stay at your stations, and everyone in quarters, stay in your quarters. I guess at some point they stop sticking to that, because we see Uhura go from she's at the comm station, then she's like in her quarters, then she's in sickbay, so she's kind of like going all over the ship. So I wasn't really sure what their social distancing procedures are.
It may have been one of those things where as the more and more people were infected, they started bending the rules. Yeah, but
we need the essential workers.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is all a bit relatable. Mm-hmm. I guess let's get into the reveal of Una's secrets and the she keeps going back to the ready room to Google Illyrian genetic modification about like disease control, and if you've already seen it, it's because she's trying to figure out how she could maybe help the situation with what's going on with her body. And when she discovers Hemmer has gone mad and is trying to beam up a chunk of molten metal from the planet's mantle, not the core, but the mantle, some iron sulfur alloy.
Hemmer thinks big. He's ambitious in his insanity. I like it.
The scene is awesome for two reasons. One, it illustrates how genius Hemmer is and how like creatively genius he is, and a bit like how over the top and maybe even a bit of a showman he is. Mm-hmm. But it also illustrates how dangerous this disease is and how deadly it is.
Right. It's that point at which, this is something that, where in Naked Time, where it's kind of fun at first until Riley's about to crash them into a planet or something.
Yeah. What did you think when she stunned Hemmer and then picked him up like a rag doll?
I was, at that point, I think the first time I saw it, I was still kind of confused as to exactly what was going on. And I didn't quite... I didn't quite get it. I was like, "What is up here?" I thought it was maybe some weird fallout from the virus or something like that. But as it turns out, Illyrians are strong.
I just want to point out this comment in our live audience from my friend Johnny, who I met in Chicago. But Johnny Tsunami is saying, I was like, oh shit, Hemmer is smoking crack. I don't know why I think that's hilarious. But...
Classic Trek concern.
But yeah, this is when she does, confess, okay, people are going to kill themselves. They're beaming up molten material onto the ship. Like, I'm going to come clean. I'm Illyrian. Doc, you got to do something. Find a cure. My body cured this disease in me. Make it cure it in everyone else. And Mbenga is like, oh, yeah, it ain't going to be that easy. That's not exactly how the science works. So I liked that it wasn't an easy solution like that. You kind of feel the escalation of stakes.
Yeah, although I guess they kind of ultimately sort of luck into it, right?
That is true, but I love the message of the episode about the... And I guess before we get into the fight with Leon and the whole like how Una's uniqueness saves the day, before we talk about that, just want the moment before that when Mbenga has that conversation about like the new bigotries and that notion of like humanity has gotten better, but we still have issues. There's still more improvement that's required, and we might not have racism on Earth, but when we started going to space, we started, meeting different people and developing new bigotries. So we're having to constantly overcome and keep improving. And I think that you could debate if that matches Roddenberry's vision or not, which is kind of true about everything in Star Trek. But I think you can definitely make a case for it. That one of the things Roddenberry talked about was like the not the perfection of humanity, but the continuing improvement of humanity. And so yeah, like just because we get over these things that are these big problems, these big hurdles to overcome now, that doesn't mean that like we should be satisfied. There's going to be more things we have to improve and better ourselves on.
Yeah, and I think honestly, I feel like that's a pretty, even in a utopian future, that bit of realism I think has to be acknowledged, and I think it's kind of important that they are saying those things. Is that you can't rest on your laurels, you can't start building up an ego, thinking that we are the advanced race, this is the ideal. It's got to always be tempered with an acknowledgement that you probably have some things you don't even realize are problems.
And it ties into the Star Trek canon as well. We've seen, some bigotry between humans and Vulcans, between humans and augmented people. So it does track with what has been established on screen. But yeah, Leon overheard that conversation. She learned that her friend, that her maybe role model she looked up to, Una, is one of these terrible genetically enhanced creatures. And she's ready to go dive into the warp core, I guess blow up the ship. So again, what I was talking about, escalation of stakes, very important. And we get the Superwoman fight, because I think they're both pretty strong, right? She's got Khan blood, she's got Illyrian blood.
I was going to ask, do we yet know for sure that she is Khan's genetics manifest in her?
I'm assuming they do. The fact that she was able to last more than a few seconds in this fight, I think would indicate she did. It is
I suppose so.
It's a bit
but she's
frustrating.
Also security chief. She knows how to roll with a punch and
sure, yeah,
do kung fu shit.
She's got training. It's a little frustrating they didn't spell that out, but given the nature of the show of like building on certain arcs while telling these episodic stories, I'm sure it's going to come up more, and so I'm not too worried about it. I think they'll explain it more eventually at some point.
Yeah, I'm content to wait to see that they do more with her. But yeah, she was kind of she's been a red herring, or she's going to be a red herring for a little while until they do say it, as we wonder about what her genetic abilities are. I thought that they were going to play off of her genetics being somewhat like Khan's in Star Trek Into Darkness, that was, indeed going to play some role.
Superblood?
Superblood, yep.
Yeah. Please don't do that.
You know what? If they did it in some way that that wasn't so dumb as the movie, that wasn't just like, it just revives shit, and it's there's no reason why we couldn't use it forever. There has to be either consequences, difficulties in reproducing it, something like that. But maybe she's just like, also at this point, I would guess she's probably too genetically distant for her blood to be that potent.
But you could always say, well, those genes were just strong enough that they hung in there. So you kind of do whatever the writers want to do there. But what you pointed out, Dave, how they kind of luck into a solution. I'll ask you in a moment if you're okay with that or not. But I'm okay with it because I love these stories. It's like the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer story. It's like, that thing that made you different, that made you the outcast, or what, but like that thing that's unique to you, that is actually a valuable contribution to the rest of us, to society, or to the team, or to the ship, or whatever story you're telling. Kind of like remember the Deep Space Nine episode House of Quark, when Quark got married to that Klingon woman Grilka, and he used his finance knowledge to actually win the day and get her house in order and defeat her rivals and everything.
Right.
And
he basically got to the one thing the Klingons weren't ready for was Ferengi financial guile.
Yeah, and he even says, I can't fight this dude in a sword fight duel, but this is the way, this is my way. What's the Uncut Gems meme? Like, I'm gonna do this my way or whatever with Adam Sandler. Like this is how I win. Right. Yeah, I was like, this is how I win thing. But
that's a trope that can be very pleasing. I think it works well, and I also yes, they sort of luck into it in that instance, but I also sort of feel like they'd been doing enough work throughout the episode that essentially they got a break at this point, but they had done a lot of work, and so it didn't feel like a cheat to me.
And Chapel still had to do like some cool doctor stuff because she was bragging at the end when she talked about the chimeric antibodies.
Yeah, she had to seize on those real quick before they faded. Which, by the way, that's the perfect example of how you could have done with the con blood in Star Trek Into Darkness of like, oh, it's a very short-lived thing. We could only do it in that exact moment, within a short span, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it is still like, okay, I'm not quite. It was radiation mixed with Illyrian blood and maybe like the human augment blood from Khan, but that made the chimeric Dave, you taught me what the word chimeric means. That's like when you take different things and mix them together.
Sure, it's I forget the exact meaning, but it's from the chimera. It means usually that I think it's mutable. It's something that changes. I'm looking.
I know more about chimerium because I watched Star Trek Prodigy. The diviner was mining the chimerium. I know more about chimerium than I do chimeric antibodies, but
okay, I don't think the definition is going to quite help us here, but yes, they were a little bit gobbledygook, a little bit what's the term? The Trek thing, technobabble-ish. They're a little technobabbly about it.
But I think it's in the tradition of how Star Trek science works. It's like, okay, it's like half real world science, half made up fantasy science, but there's like a balance there of like believability and fun storytelling.
Usually you understand, like, if Trek is doing its technobabble right, and I actually think for all that they have kind of a reputation for that being a crutch, that usually they do it fairly right in the sense that if Geordi says they're going to try something, I usually kind of can interpret what it was he was intending to do. Like, we're going to take this energy, put it through this processor, and try and turn it into this kind of energy that we need. Like, yes, that's not how he said it, but I get that's what he's trying to do. And so, like, this I think works within that same context. I got the gist of it.
Well, before we get into our ending of the episode, let's talk about the B story with Pike and Spock down on the planet. The reason why they were stranded while they were left behind is because Spock was so captivated by the journals in that journal room and trying to unlock the mysteries of these Illyrians. It is kind of a kind of an exciting idea. You go to this planet where this whole colony, these really advanced aliens were all wiped out. Like, what could have done that? And they were, kind of outcast from the Federation. The Federation didn't want much to do with these people because they were genetic engineered people. So very, very mysterious. So I get why a curious mind would be studying these journals. And then the ghosts that appear, the energy ghosts, they looked like those things that come flying out in Ghostbusters when Walter Peck blows up their containment unit. No doubt. I need to hear that that song. Yeah, it's a groovy song.
It is. I don't know if you've ever heard the full song, but like the first half is this very different sounding song that's real chill, and then it kind of like hits the drop. Yeah. Anyway, the ghosts looked cool. It's too bad they can't talk. They had to, I guess, help by being scary and banging on doors and stuff.
Yeah, these things, they're like, we're trying to save you. And they're like holding the door. Spock gets his neck cut open because they're trying to push the barricade open, I guess. Oh, I love that moment though when Pike has his phaser, ready to make a stand against the plasma creatures, and
Spock says, "Well, go ahead."
Well, Pike says, like, "Does that thing have a stun setting?" He's like, "Spock, I have my phaser out. Why are you looking at this canister?" And he says, "Does that thing have a stun setting?" And then Spock says, "I'm arming us with knowledge."
It's both kind of funny and absolutely true. Like, this is how Spock wins, to use the Uncut Gems meme.
But yeah, when the storm knocks down the window in there, the ghosts actually protect them, and later Spock theorizes that the plasma creatures were actually the colonists. They evolved into these things. They were addicted to light, ran into the ion storm, and were transformed into these spooky entities.
Yeah. I'm not quite sure about the science behind that, but it's such a cool idea that I will allow for it. I also this is something that I want them to return to. Actually, I think I need to see more Illyrian
You say that
stuff.
for every episode, though. You're like, they need to return to this planet and show this again.
Well, I actually do think so. I think this one is actually particularly likely because the Illyrian heritage story and the Federation's interaction with them, that is a clear. I think it has to be a running subplot, right?
Well,
you don't think they're going to drop it, do you?
I don't know if it'll be these Illyrians because Una is from a different colony.
That's true. But what I'd like to, I think it'd be cool if they say like, oh yeah, we set up a Starfleet base on there, and they've found a way to interact and communicate to some degree with these wraiths. The ion wraiths. Give them some cool name, and we've actually learned a lot about Illyrians from these guys. That kind of thing. It doesn't even have to be like a major part of subsequent Illyrian episodes, but I would love to hear that happened. I like the idea of sort of what Lower Decks promises, which is the sort of follow through on things. Because, if we take Starfleet as loosely analogous to the United States, as it's sometimes and often been, our interaction overseas and our inability to follow through or plan for the long term, probably one of our biggest weaknesses as a country. I would like to see that represented as in a more ideal way as like, the evolved United States, the ideal United States in Star Trek's future, where they do follow-ups. They don't just go there, think they've solved some alien planet's problem, and just leave. I want more of a sense that they follow through. Well, and I know that's kind of on Lower Decks, which
that's why we watched Deep Space Nine, because that was like, we're just gonna stay in this one spot forever.
Yeah, that's the hardcore version of it. I want the light version, the balance. I think they could strike on this one, which is
a lot of people say that though. A lot of people have made the same request that you're making.
Yeah,
I think that's not a priority for me though.
I think there's a way to do it neatly, and I honestly, Deep Space Nine already did it in some ways where just a small plot from a season past or whatever comes back in some way. That's even those small things I think would be meaningful to me.
Yeah, it's just I'm so used to like the original series and Next Generation format. It's not something that I expect or even I think of. Like, it doesn't seem obvious to me to bring that up after every episode. But I do hear other people make that same request that you're making of seeing those follow-up stories. I mean, I kind of like, oh yeah, Harry Mudd, like maybe we'll run into him again, or maybe we'll see Q or Vash and have like these recurring characters, but I don't really think of it in terms of like, oh, like let's come back to this planet. And it's kind of like a weird thing in Wrath of Khan when like they go back to SETI Alpha 5 and see what happened with Khan, even though Kirk kind of proposes that at the end of Space
Seed. It makes complete sense to me. Like, yeah, I would hope that they would do that. Arguably, they should have done that much earlier, and probably Kirk should have in some way warned them and filed.
Right. No, it makes sense in universe. Just from like the storytelling formula, like that's just not what I expect. And
when you're doing done in one stories, you're done with the central drama of something. You can move on. But they are also doing character subplots, and at the very least, the Illyrian subplot I think will continue. So
yeah, but if you came to me and you're like, Fatheree, we're going to do another Illyrian episode. Do you want to go back to Hediment 9 or do like a completely different Illyrian planet with different things going on? I would say like, oh yeah, let's do something different. I don't need to see Hediment 9 again. But it'd be fine if they did that too.
But it was, it doesn't have to be so specific as that. To me, it could be more like, all they need to do is make a reference to it. Say that they've already learned something more about the Illyrians, including, from talking to those ion ghosts. That kind of thing.
Yeah, that'd be neat. But the thing at the end, it was a kind of a cool payoff when Spock says like, oh, the reason why these people probably died, why they couldn't contain this virus, is because they had started undoing their genetic engineering. They wanted to apply for Federation membership, and they like left us this note saying like, yeah, we died because we were undoing our genetic engineering. We wanted you to know that like we really thought the Federation was cool and we wanted to join, but I guess we all got wiped out by this virus, and that makes Pike reevaluate his feelings on the Illyrians, and he's like, "Oh wow, their good faith gesture might have been what killed them. That's pretty tragic, and maybe we shouldn't be so judgmental against the people who have these genetic modifications."
Yeah, that led to a really interesting reflection from Una about whether she would have been so well received by Pike if she weren't, as you know, one of the good ones.
One of the good ones.
Yeah. That's that's a harsh term to hear applied to Starfleet, and a kind of an interesting wake up call, I think, in some ways.
Yeah, let's talk about like the endings. There's 3 scenes at the end. They're all with Una. But we have Una and Leon, Una and Pike, and then Una and Mbenga. The Una and Leon thing, that's just kind of like, hey, no hard feelings after we were beating each other up, and you said some mean things, and Leon's like, yeah, like I kind of meant it, I kind of didn't mean it, but the thing with the Illyrian philosophy that Una tries to explain about like they weren't like maniacs like Khan who wanted to take over the world and become like these superior beings and subjugate everyone else. The Illyrians modified themselves because they would go and explore planets and colonize planets, and instead of terraforming the planets, they would adapt themselves to fit the environment. And that does kind of sound like, oh, that seems like kind of like, like a peaceful people. They're very much like in tune with nature and their surroundings, and maybe even like a bit humble to be like, I'm going to adapt myself to this new place, not adapt it to me.
Right. It sounds like the Federation, the implication here is that the Federation got so damn scared, or Starfleet got so damn scared by the eugenics wars that they clamped down hard. The same way it seems like they clamped down hard on artificial intelligences, like Data. It seems like anytime fear is the driving force for any move the Federation makes, it's usually a bad one.
That's Picard season 1. Remember when he tells Rios, fear is the great destroyer? Like the Romulans had like that prophecy of Cheb-Zaneb, the great destroyer, and Picard tells Rios like, no, like fear is the great destroyer. Fear is the enemy.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. If you distill it down to its basics, is that's the underlying thing for sort of all xenophobia and tribalism.
So what do you think when she goes to turn over her badge to Pike and confess to him and says like, okay, you can go ahead and turn me over to the authorities? And Pike's like, nah, I'm not going to do that. I got your back.
I didn't think that he was going to turn her over to the authorities, but
very predictable.
But geez, why can't I say the name of the actor?
Anson Mount.
Anson Mount is a guy who can pull that scene off and make me feel it, and so I like that. I like that he was, even sounded a little like there's a little bravado to his voice where he's like, if Starfleet comes gunning for you, then we're gonna have an interesting discussion. It kind of sounded like he was like ready to throw hands.
Yeah.
At the same time, her follow-up scene does, arguably reflect not poorly on him, but like that it had to come to that, I suppose.
He kind of makes a mistake by saying like, "Oh, Una, you're a great example of a Illyrian." So
you're not crazy like the other ones.
Yeah, and the way that she takes that is like, yeah, why do I have to be like, this great example, one of the best first officers in the fleet, the savior of the Enterprise from the light virus? Why can't I just be me? And that's something that I think. I mean, I can't really comment on as.
Well, you know what, Fatheree? You brought up Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer earlier. What if he hadn't had a red nose?
Yeah,
what if he hadn't been able to help Santa with it?
Right.
That is.
Then they still would have not let him play the reindeer games and made fun of him and called him names. So
it's interesting to call out that sort of trope. There is a sort of satisfaction in seeing somebody who's good at at what they do win over other people, but you shouldn't necessarily have to win the talent show for people to realize you have merit as a person.
And that is kind of a problem with those types of stories, that I say, like, I enjoy those. And I think there is a good message to that, about, like, it's very much infinite diversity and infinite combinations. Like, oh yeah, like, because we have this unique person here, it's actually a benefit to the rest of us. That is an important story. But it's like you said, well, what if it's not a great benefit? Why can't they just exist as unique? And because this episode actually points that out, I think this is a wonderful version of that type of story.
Yeah. Conceptually, like, I feel like something about the episode, it was more like, not even structure. Maybe the scenes just weren't as, like, overall as satisfying to me as the scenes in the previous episodes. But as far as, like, the message, the way the story's intertwined, it's a pretty impressive episode, and I like a lot of the thematics. I feel like it's a way to sort of be critical of Starfleet without
ruining Starfleet.
Right. They don't seem like they're vilified. I don't feel like it's like, corrupt.
No, it's like she says, like she tells Mbenga, Starfleet is right about a lot of things. They just happen to be wrong on this.
Yeah. So, all right. And speaking of, let's get to the good doctor.
Yeah. So, Dave, this is where you said you had your problems, but it's when Una, in trying to fix the transporter issues, the biofilter issues, they learn it's Mbenga's fault. This whole thing was Mbenga's fault because he is keeping his daughter, I think her name is Rukia, and she is sick with something they made up called Signochemia. I Googled it to see if that had been in Star Trek before, if it was a real virus, and it doesn't seem to be, or a real disease.
It's a space virus.
This bothered me at first when he's like, I have her stuck in the transporter buffer. Because I'm like, oh no, why are you doing that? You can't do that with transporter technology. But then they throw in the line like, it's okay as long as you rematerialize them from time to time. And I'm like, yeah, well, I guess maybe, yeah, it
did sort of beg the question to me of like, there's probably like, I don't know, I would think there'd be like hundreds of people who would want to be doing the same thing, probably would have thought of the same idea. But that's not too big a thing. It's okay if we kind of make out that this guy who's clearly got access to pretty amazing technology, the best of the best kind of transporters, if he's maybe the only person who's...
And I'm assuming it probably isn't... It's probably not very safe. It's probably still kind of dangerous. And
well, like I said, Hemmer was about to just like reboot the system and potentially kill her. So clearly not safe.
And I also wonder, they have like technology to put people in suspended animation, right? Khan, speaking of Khan, was floating around asleep in cryo sleep in Space Seed. So I'm thinking this might be a unique situation, like maybe like this disease can't be suspended.
Right, like the person could be in hibernation, but the disease would just keep going or whatever.
Exactly. But Una seems to help him out. She says that she's going to establish, his own dedicated power source. I don't know if she's just going to keep the secret between her and him. It kind of seems that way, that like she's going to keep his secret because she knows what it's like to, I guess, be forced to keep a secret from the rest of the ship. Or I don't know, maybe she tells people. It's not really spelled out.
Yeah, I guess we'll know more about that in future episodes.
Yeah, it's definitely going to come up again, so I'm not too worried about it. But I guess like her log entry there at the end, where she's talking about like the things we talked about. What if she hadn't saved those lives? Would Pike still have been forgiving? And the question she asked, when will it be enough to just be? And I think a lot of people who might be marginalized for whatever reason, I think might find that pretty relatable.
Mm-hmm.
And I have no idea what that story is that Mbenga is reading to his kid at the end. Something about King Ridley and Queen Neve and the Mercury Stone.
I meant to look it up and just see if it was a real thing or just invented names. Yeah. I never got around to it.
I'm going to assume it's invented, or it's like a really big deep cut to like a show somebody used to work on or something like that.
Yeah.
But I think we hit everything. Did you have any other final thoughts on this episode?
Well, I did just want to mention, since I criticized the Mbenga thing, it's I think that his character was already a character I kind of liked his depiction of and seemed warm, even though he didn't have a particular hook or anything. I guess I don't think Dr. McCoy necessarily did, other than that he was kind of country doctor, and they didn't have a special hook. But now, like, it does seem like Mbenga will. Well, like, in a way, it'll be weird if he's not always, like, kind of thinking about this in some way, questing for it. I guess that probably on, like, I don't actually know what his quest would entail. Like, does it mean on a certain planet that he's like, oh, they have this, high level of this kind of radiation, or this sort of, organic plant life or whatever, and so I'm going to go and dig around and see if I can find anything that suits the needs of a cure. It's a little weird to just drop that out of nowhere, and like I don't know, it felt like a little hokey to me. It just felt a little big and melodramatic, like that he's got his secret daughter living in the transporter. It's a bit much. I think I have to process this one and see how they do with it in the future before I can make a judgment call on it. But I just know that I liked him already without needing to have like him like fighting for his daughter on it.
Well, we know eventually they're going to need a reason to make him not be chief medical officer on the Enterprise. So it might end up being what gets him out of the way for Dr. McCoy to come take over.
Right. Right. Well, they cure his girl, but she's going to have a long recovery time, and he's going to go stay with her. Starfleet drums him out. Yes, it's cool that you were able to save her, hopefully. You're really hopefully. But you certainly broke a lot of regulations, and there's no way we can keep you on board. Something
He's
like
gotta
that.
Save her, though, right? It's going to be heartbreaking if they kill her off. I mean, it's possible. The show might do that, I guess, but
yeah, they would have to really write a good story about it, and I think they could. I don't suspect it'll happen, but I'm not going to assume anything. Star Wars has told some of its best stories have sad endings. You
said Star Wars.
Oh my gosh. City on the Edge of Forever, Wrath of Khan, and there's was it the Visitor, so many amazing and sad stories in Star Trek that if they can find a way to pull it off without making it feel cheap, then it is their story to tell, and I'd be interested to hear it.
That's interesting. I've heard some things about the next 2 episodes of Strange New Worlds that I don't want to talk about because I hate giving stuff away, and I haven't watched them yet. I'm probably going to watch the 4th one later tonight because I have access to it. But the thing that I've heard is some of the tones of these upcoming episodes are very different. And, kind of like how the original series and many of the past Star Trek shows, but let's just take the original series, for example. You can get Balance of Terror, this, submarine battle type episode with a lot of suspense and action and death. But then you go from that, and in the same show, you can do an episode like The Trouble with Tribbles that's, like all comedy and trying to get laughs out of the audience, and is a lot more lighthearted. There's going to be some big tonal shift from episode to episode with some of the upcoming stories and Strange New Worlds. And it would be really cool if they can, do these stories well, if they can do like a good comedy episode that makes us all laugh.
I saw that mentioned somewhere that there was like a comedy episode either in the works or that they were talking about it.
The showrunners I think it was Henry Alonso Meyer himself who was specifically talking about, like, there's one coming up soon.
Cool.
But also if they could do like a really sad episode, like do one of those tragic, heartbreaking stories.
Yeah. Well, in the comments, I threw it up a second ago and now I've lost it. Somebody said it's been a while since a long time. There we go. N Squared said been a long time since a make you cry episode. And I think that's true for me, although, you know what?
You just cried at...
Final episode of Picard, yes, yeah, I agree.
I was about to say.
That's true.
No,
so
I'm an easy crier, so I don't feel like I'm qualified to respond to that. But yeah, I think
a big baby.
Almost every season of Star Trek has had like at least one episode that made me get a little, not like full on cry. I don't like full on cry, but my tear ducts will secrete liquid. Like I'll get like a little misty eyed. I'm not like bawling like a baby, but
I by that same token, when they try for it and the music swells and they expect you to, and I don't feel it, it's actually, I hate that. I hate when they try for it and I'm like, oh man, you guessed so wrong. I don't care about this, unfortunately, not to the degree that you want me to. So, but I found myself stirred in this one, like Pike's speech in that first episode, and gosh, I'm trying to think. I don't know if there's been any other scenes quite there yet, but I felt that sort of swell of emotion, and I feel like the writing level on this could get there. I think they could pull it off.
Well, Ion Storm tour guide in our live audience says that she hasn't cried since Deep Space Nine, so
Hardcore.
I think she's overdue. So
Respect.
maybe Strange New Worlds will melt her cold heart. We'll find out.
I want to ask what episode it was, but I also, like, since I haven't finished, I guess I don't want to necessarily spoil anything for me.
Well, if that's all we got, then
yeah.
I guess like the one last thing I have is just a little talk about like the Illyrians. And I have some stuff
Illyrians,
on this
Father Illyrians.
Illyrians.
Yeah.
But I'm going to mention some stuff about them in a second in the Gorn eggs, but I guess this is the first real exploration of them in canon. They did show up a little bit in Enterprise, but this does kind of cement a lot of things. This is the most information we've ever gotten about them, and only the second time they've been mentioned, and confirms the way that the novels and stuff have explained number one's backstory, even though they do it differently here. So I expect to see more of it, as well as seeing more of M'Benga and his kid, and I guess we'll see where those things go. But I guess let's go ahead and move on to the Gorn egg segment of the show.
Let's hatch some Gorn eggs.
So these are all of our Easter eggs, in jokes, and continuity connections in the episode that I thought were worth bringing up. So, starting off, like I mentioned, this episode is directed by Leslie Hope, who played Kira Maru, the mother of Kira Nerys in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. We see her in an episode, I believe it's called Wrongs Darker Than Night? Or something like that. It's one of those long titles. Also, as Dave pointed out, the stylish field jackets on the away team. Obviously, a callback to the jackets worn by the landing party in The Cage, the first appearance of many of these characters in the very first Star Trek episode ever made. But I think that the ones that they have in Strange New Worlds actually resemble the jackets in Star Trek Enterprise more than anything else, which I think also looked really cool. And I would totally want to wear one of the Enterprise away team landing party, whatever, filled jackets.
Yeah.
They didn't really do much with them, but they have them there in the first episode when they go to Rigel 10, and they show up a couple more times after that. But I like the Strange New Worlds one, too, and if I ever have the ability to buy one of those, I will certainly purchase it.
The Strange New Worlds one is better.
Yeah, I prefer that one, but I like them both.
These look a little bit like they could be about to open up a Vegas lounge act.
Well, the ion storm that hits Hediment 9, that's the first ion storm we've seen in Strange New Worlds, but ion storms go all the way back to Season 1 of the original series, the episode Court Martial. The thing that stood out to me, though, here is that they can see the ion storm from the surface of the planet, and that's how it worked in the episode Mirror, Mirror. It also made me nervous when Kyle is concerned about beaming people up. Like, if I beam them up now, you don't know what I'll get back. And I was thinking, like, oh, I'll tell you exactly what you'll get back. You'll get them beamed into the mirror universe, because that's what happens when you use your transporters in an ion storm. And they also had the ion storm in Star Trek Discovery. That's how Mirror Lorca came over to the Prime universe, as he beamed in an ion storm, and he got switched over to the Prime universe. But talking about those Illyrians, did I get it right that time?
You're saying the hard I. It's Illyrians.
Oh, yeah, Starfleet boy. That's what he's talking about. Like, he makes fun of how I say Italians.
Yeah. Yeah. You say it as a hard I, not I.
Yeah, it's, I guess Texas' way of saying it. But I'm gonna keep doing that, so y'all just have to live with it. But
that's all right. We can move on.
the first appearance of the Illyrians, though, was in the Enterprise episode Damage, their first canonical appearance, where that's an episode, Dave, I don't believe you've seen it, but that's in that season 3 arc. It's basically Archer steals their warp coil and strands them in space. It's going to take them a few years to get back to their planet. He basically does like Voyager to them. He turns them into Voyager. and because he needed the warp coils to go complete his mission to save Earth from the Xindi. So it's kind of one of those darker episodes where
that's pretty
the heroes have to be the bad guys.
Pretty morally ambiguous.
I mean, like, he gives them like a bunch of food and a bunch of supplies, and is like, "Okay, I hope you make it. Sorry, I hate to do this, but yeah." And he takes their warp coils at gunpoint. It was very debated at the time if that was pushing it too far.
Actually, makes me want to watch it more.
But the Illyrian captain in that episode, he was played by Casey Biggs, who plays the Deep Space Nine character Damar, who you haven't seen a ton of because we've only gone up to season 4 in our Deep Space Nine watches. But he's that Gul Dukat's right hand man. He's with them on that bird of prey when they take over that Klingon bird of prey, and you'll see more of him. And see, actually, the very next episode of DS9 that we're gonna watch, the season 5 premiere, Damar is in that episode, so you'll see him there. But before they showed up in canon, the Illyrians had shown up in the Star Trek novels, going all the way back to Dorothy Fontana's Vulcan's Glory novel in 1989, I believe, or some point in the 80s. And I think this original story there was that they were number one's people. She was an alien. And I know some of the recent novels have talked about the Illyrians, but they kind of changed that to where she was a human raised by them. And I kind of like that. I kind of liked her being human. So what they're doing in Strange New Worlds with her being a secret, genetically engineered alien, that's a new spin on it, with taking some of these concepts that have been used before. They're doing a new thing with it. So she obviously looks quite different from how they looked on Enterprise. But those plasma creatures also look different, too. So I think it would be cool if, like, every time we see some Illyrians, if they're just, like, a very different appearance from the other ones.
It's an interesting point. Maybe the reason she could blend in with Starfleet was because she had lucked into sort of typical Terran features.
Yeah. As long as she can, like, trick the, like, when you what do you call it, when you go get like a physical or whatever, like, as long as she can, like, trick the doctors there, because it's not like she's going to be getting sick very often and having to go to the doctor. It kind of seems like her body can just repair anything instantly. It'll glow red and fix it.
She's Bruce Willis and Unbreakable. But also she may have some genetic modification to look human. I guess that will be something we'll find out.
Yeah. They're probably they're probably pretty capable of engineering their bodies to look passable as human if they wanted to. We also, of course, in this episode get mentions of Khan and the eugenics war and augments, but they do drop the name Khan Noonien Singh, and I like the way that Leon was saying augment as like she put like so much hate into it. Like, it definitely sounded like a racial slur when she was like augment, you're an augment monster to number one. But yeah, the term augment originally came from Star Trek Enterprise Season 4, when they have another Soong character. Brent Spiner plays another Soong who's thawed out some of Khan's augment embryos that were in cold storage, and he has his own little race of augments. So that's in Star Trek Enterprise Season 4. There was a 3-episode arc there dealing with that. In Pike's ready room / conference room, because it's kind of like Discovery, they have the same room for both. I noticed last week that on the walls you see like a little model of the NX class starship, like the NX-01 Enterprise from Star Trek Enterprise. But right across from there, in this episode, you can see on the other side of the room there is a Daedalus model of the Daedalus class starship. So I thought that was cool. I'm a big fan of that design. It was one of Matt Jeffrey's early concepts for the Enterprise. And there's a model of it in Captain Sisko's office in Deep Space Nine, so it can be seen there as well. But I was happy to see that.
I think I only like the version of it where it became the Pasteur.
Yeah, I don't like the Olympic class.
We'll discuss this off camera.
I don't know what's third. It's just like total like subjective thing. It's just what your taste is.
That globe bridge looks awful, but
I like it. I like the big sphere.
Well, for a future discussion. What else we got, Fatheree? When
M'Benga talks about the human and Vulcan bigotries, about the the fear of human blood and Vulcan blood. It almost sounded like he was talking about like that like people being concerned with like race mixing, and that made me think of Terra Prime in Star Trek Enterprise, which if you think of the episode Terra Prime and Demons, or is it no Demons first, then Terra Prime? It was a two-parter. But if you think of that as like the actual like Enterprise finale and just kind of ignore these are the voyages, the last episode of the show that everyone hated. But this is actually like a cool ending of the show. But it kind of shows the crew of Star Trek Enterprise, the NX-01. They went on like all these adventures to kind of establish mankind, to establish humanity as someone reaching out into space and exploring. But then at the end of the episode, they had to come home and deal with their demons on Earth and deal with Peter Wellers with RoboCop or Admiral Marcus. But he had this hate group Terra Prime, and they were very anti-alien and anti-Earth, going around and hanging out with meeting all these alien species, and Enterprise making first contact with all these people and telling them how to get to Earth and where Earth is. And so they I thought that was probably something that might have been on M'Benga's mind when he's talking about like these new bigotries, like in the 22nd century when there's this whole hate group on Earth that didn't want us, meeting aliens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
And then the trick of storing someone in a transporter buffer that M'Benga was doing, and I guess the hack for him was you just have to take them out ever so often. But the first time we saw that was in the Next Generation episode Relics, when Scotty stored himself in a transporter buffer for 80 years. But it was an incredible feat of engineering when he did it, and very risky because his friend who was with him didn't survive, but luckily Scotty made it. And we see that in there's an episode of Star Trek Voyager where they're trying to smuggle some people across space, and they're storing them in the transporter buffer temporarily, and so it's often depicted as being very difficult. That's why I was initially concerned about M'Benga doing it, but then when they're like, well, I can't just leave her in there all the time. I got to take her out when no one's looking. It's like, okay, I can roll with that, I guess. But that's all the stuff I had. We do like at the end of the show here to talk about some feedback we get from our audience in our subspace transmission segment, and we would love to hear what people thought about this episode. So please comment on YouTube, hit me up on Twitter, leave a comment in the Tex-Trek Facebook page, or in our new Discord server. You can express your feelings there as well. But just let us know what you thought about this episode. We might share it next week. But Dave, what are people thinking about the show so far with the last two episodes?
Yeah, these were subspace transmissions about the first two episodes, the debut episodes of Strange New Worlds, and people are liking it. Arthur Lamoureux says Strange New Worlds is the show that this original fan has been waiting for since the original cast stopped making movies. I lost a little bit of the message, but he's a fan of the other Trek outings, but this one was striking a specific chord. Kelly St. Georgie, I'm not quite sure if I'm probably butchering that name, wrote, deliciously good, but no calories involved. Highly intoxicating, but no alcohol involved. Superb, fascinating, interesting, so wonderful. May Star Trek Strange New Worlds live long and prosper. Let's see. The Templin Institute said, I wasn't expecting much, but I'm astonished at how good it is. A few things I'm not a big fan of. Officers disclosing their backstories unprompted during a briefing seems a bit unprofessional, but it's been a fun ride so far. Hope it keeps it up. And
I didn't realize the Templin Institute, sorry to interrupt, but I didn't realize that they had replied to that tweet, but they're like a huge YouTube channel, so that's like really cool to get some recognition from them. Go check them out. They have some if you're into like the lore dump type videos, if you want like those long YouTube videos that just give you like all the information on something.
Romulans or whatever.
Yeah, they do stuff like that with Star Trek, but also like Star Wars, I think Halo, all kinds of stuff. So check them out if that sounds cool to you.
Word. And lastly, looks like Ole Lakoy Kenobi says, it's the Trek I was missing and didn't even know it. It's respectful of the past without sacrificing the present, and I love standalone episodes again. So, man, it's pretty overwhelmingly positive. Most people might have like little criticisms here and there, but it seems to be winning hearts and minds.
I'm trying to think of when was the last time like everyone was like really into a Star Trek thing, and it's really sad how I'm like, okay, a lot of people have struggled with the new shows. A lot of people struggled with the Kelvin movies. A lot of people didn't really like Enterprise. A lot of people didn't really like Voyager. It's like, do I have to go back to like Star Trek First Contact?
Fatheree, I know you pointed out that people were all pretty on board the first episode of Picard season 2.
Right, but then that wore off very quickly. So,
but it was a brief moment.
Again.
For a brief moment, Camelot was back.
Yes, but.
And then suddenly, for like 3 episodes now, it seems. So it'll be interesting to see. Yes, can they indeed keep it up? There is, if you're a little bit paranoid about such things like I am, then you might find yourself a little worried. Oh, we're gonna hit a bad episode. But like honestly, at this point, after 3, episodes that were at their lowest, I think quite good. I feel like even if I hit a bad episode, it's not going to impact me too much because, I'll wait a week.
Sure.
And then I'll be back on.
Well, anything else?
Nope.
Cool. Well, thank you everyone who watched us live, and thank you everyone who checked us out later. Just a reminder that Starfleet Boy, he normally does the Starfleet Boy After Dark show on Fridays, but that's no longer going to be the case. He is moving his show to Saturday night. I think it will be at 8:30 Eastern time tomorrow. If you're watching us live now on Friday, it'll be tomorrow on Saturday, so nothing tonight. But you can check out Starfleet Boy After Dark tomorrow night. And then starting next week, he will be doing some Friday content for the other Star franchise with the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. He's going to be talking about that. I might even be on there, although like I'm not. I don't think I'm going to like this Obi-Wan Kenobi show, so I might be having to explain why it's no good, or it might surprise me and turn out to be great, and then I can go and heap praise on it with everyone else who's liking it. So who knows? We'll have to wait and find out.
I see in the comments, Starfleet Boy notes not tomorrow.
Oh, not tomorrow.
There's a hiatus happening.
Okay, there's no After Dark tomorrow. I apologize. But there is the Starfleet Boy regular channel at what time? I think 3 Eastern, 2 Central. There's going to be a original series episode discussion on the original series episode of The Lights of Zetar. So you can check that out. I'll be there. And like I mentioned at the top of the show, please tune in Sunday to the Trek Central stream at 3 p.m. Central. That'd be 4 Eastern, 3 Central. Me and Starfleet Boy will be over there with the Trek Central channel, and there's going to be some fun stuff announced there. Otherwise, though, Dave and I will be back next week to talk about Star Trek Strange New World Season 1, Episode 4. And until then, as always, live long and prosper, y'all.
Listen to the Tex-Trek podcast through Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or at tex-trek.com. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/tex-trek. And follow Fatheree on Twitter at TXTrek. Please support us by liking our videos and subscribing to our channel on YouTube. Thank you and take care.